Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Carolam Cymru revision sessions. This session will focus on the GCSE English language and it's looking at the reading section of Unit 2. This will be presented by Yvonne Thomas of Ysgol Greenhill in Tenby. The session will last around 45 minutes where Mrs Thomas will go through the relevant subject content. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer section and we'll endeavour to answer your questions during the session. The session will be recorded with the recording and any relevant resources uploaded to the e-sgol website in the Carolam Cymru area. Over to you, Mrs Thomas.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to take you through today the English Language Unit 2 GCSE paper, and I'm hoping to get through the whole reading section of the paper, go through the questions with you and ideas on how to respond to them. Okay, so as Miss Hales just said, my name is Mrs Thomas and I'll be presenting the lesson today. Miss Hales is also available, as she said, during the lesson to answer any questions you may have through the session, so do feel free to use the Q question and answer function to ask questions. So as I said, I'll be taking you through Unit 2 past paper and talking through the questions and successful ways to respond to those questions. Okay, so the question, by the end of this lesson, you'll be familiar with the types of reading questions on a Unit 2 paper, and you'll understand how to find the answers for these questions and how to structure a response to them. Okay, so the question paper that I'm focusing on tonight is the Summer 2018 Unit 2 paper, and I'm going to focus on just section A, which is the reading section. Obviously section B is the writing section, but my focus isn't on that this week. Okay, so the first text that you're given is a website advertising overseas volunteering experiences. So you will be given, as you've probably seen past papers before, and I'm sure plenty of you have already done some mock exams, you will have seen lots of the different resources that the exams include. So they're generally either extracts from websites, perhaps novels, perhaps web pages, perhaps instructions. So all of these things, they're there to challenge you, and the questions asked around them make sure that they test your skills. So we'll look at the first question. So it's a 1-mark question, and you'll find that as you move along the paper, the questions tend to get more challenging. But the first few questions are normally 1 or 2-mark questions. But remember, all of these questions count and they can make a difference in your grades. So you should endeavour to answer as many of the questions as you can. Well, all of the questions ideally, but please don't leave any questions unanswered. You know, if you can't find the answer, then just guess. Okay, so this first question then, it says, in what year was Projects Abroad founded? Okay, so this is a find and copy question, so you need to read through the text and find the answer. So if you look at the text, the way it's set out, so there's different sections on the text. So in this section here, it says why Projects Abroad. So I've already found the 2 words that the question's asking about, so projects abroad. And then it says, for over 20 years, Projects Abroad have been experts in volunteering abroad, work experience and gap year placements. That tells a little bit about the charity. And then it says, founded in 1992 in bold letters. Okay, so from that is our answer there. We can see that it was founded in 1992. So nice and straightforward. We find the answer and we copy the answer down. So the answer there would be 1992. Okay, the next question then is a multiple choice question. And it says, which one of the following is not offered by Projects Abroad? So we need to find things that are offered by Projects Abroad, because only one of them is the correct answer, and that's the one that isn't offered. Okay, so we need to cancel out all the incorrect answers. So you can see here on the section here, it says worthwhile projects in more than 30 destinations. So it's not that one, okay, because they offer that. That's in the list of things that they do offer. There's volunteering, the chance of volunteer abroad. So again, the title there says volunteer abroad, gap years and internships. So we know they offer that. Then flexible projects with no fixed date. So it says volunteer abroad on flexible projects with no fixed date. So again, we know that that one's correct. Work experience and gap year placements. We have to look in another section here, and it talks about work experience and gap year placements. So we know that all of those are offered by projects abroad. There's only one answer that isn't offered there. It says part-time staff employed in every destination. If we look here, it says full-time staff employed in every destination. So we know that that must be incorrect. So that's the answer that we would select. So that would be a tick for that one. Okay. The next question then, it says list three things. Hold on a second. List three things about how to contact information about how to find out information about projects abroad. Sorry. Okay, so here we have a list of things that we can do. So we can request a callback, we can request a brochure, we can request a newsletter, you can contact them, you can chat online with their staff. You can also attend information events. So we can pick any of those. Remember, it's three answers that they require. They've left space for three answers. So we can pick any of those threes and pop those in, and that would be our answer. It doesn't matter which three you put in, they would all be on the mark scheme. So you can have any of those. Again, a find and copy question. Okay, so our next text then, so that was all the questions on text A. Our next text then is adapted from a news story in a national newspaper, and it's about J.K. Rowling, and she's criticising the idea of voluntourism. So it's an article from a national newspaper there. Okay, so our first question then, which of the following statements best explains the term voluntourism? So again, it's a 1 mark question, it's a multiple choice, and it tests the ability to use verbal reasoning and deduction skills to analyse information. Okay, so on here, on the text, there is a section there which tells us about voluntourism. So it says, voluntourism refers to the popular trend of individuals travelling to developing countries to carry out volunteer work. So it tells us the definition there, so we can cancel out the three top ones, and we know that the answer is the bottom one, visiting developing countries to work as a volunteer. So you're really trying to find out the information and cancelling out the wrong answers before you're left with the correct answer. Okay, so there we go, there's the answer. Okay, the next one then, name 2 concerns affecting children who are forced to live in institutions according to Lumos. So again, this question tests the ability to use deduction skills to retrieve information. So it's again taking a look at the text and finding the information that is relevant. So if we look here, it says, Lumos argues that placing children in institutions denies them the loving and caring relationships they require and can damage their brain development. So the 2 concerns then are it denies them a loving and caring relationship and it can damage their brain development. So those are our 2 answers there. There we go. So denies children loving and caring relationships could damage their brain development. So again, it's a case of reading the text, looking at the question and trying to find the answer within that text. Okay, so then we move on to text C. Again, the questions on text A and text B tend to be 1 or 2 mark questions, sometimes a 3 mark question, but they tend to be quite straightforward questions. So even though it's tempting to just, you know, perhaps guess or not look at the information correctly or in detail, it's really important that you try and trace the answer to the questions in the text that you're looking at, because you know, a mark or 2 marks can make a difference to a grade. So you really need to have a good go at looking for the correct information. Okay, so text C then is a fact sheet all about Lumos, a charity founded by J.K. Rowling. And our first question here then, which I can't actually see. Could you read that out to me, Miss? Sorry, I can't see it.
I can, yeah. This fact sheet explains that Lumos has provided 1,418 interventions to help save the lives of children. Select one of the definitions from the list below which best describes an intervention in this context.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, so sorry about that, guys. I just couldn't see the question because I've got a tab on my screen covering it. So this question, it tests the ability to use verbal reasoning again and deduction skills to interpret meaning. With this type of question, you need to have activate a little bit of prior knowledge. So you're looking for the definition of intervention, okay, in this particular context. Okay, so intervention, the definition of it is the action of becoming intentionally involved in a situation in order to improve it or prevent it from getting worse. So you need to have some kind of perhaps a little bit of prior knowledge about that question, knowing what intervention means. So the nearest answer to that one is involvement which prevents or changes something. Okay, we know it's not the process of interfering in something, because there's nothing in this definition or, you know, what we know already that suggests that we're interfering. It doesn't talk about giving medical aid or treatment, and it doesn't talk about ignoring what has happened. Okay, so we need to think about it in context, and the answer there is involvement which prevents or changes something. That's the nearest answer to the actual definition of the word that we found there. Okay, so the next one then, this one tests the ability to use deduction skills again to retrieve information, and it asks you to list 2 ways in which Lumos has made a difference to the children and their families. Okay, so if we look at this question, it's only asking for 2 different ways, but on the actual text, there's several different ways that they've made a difference. So if you look at all of these, so it's provided 1,418 interventions to help save the lives of children suffering from malnutrition. It's helped move more than 17,000 children from harmful institutions. It's prevented almost 15,000 children from being admitted to institutions. It's trained more than 27,000 medical workers. So, you know, I can go on reading all of these out, but the fact is there are 6 different possible answers there that you can choose from. So obviously you only need to choose 2 of those, because it's only 2 marks. Well, it gives you space for 2 answers, and the question only gives you 2 marks. So here we go. So I just chose 2 of those. So this one here and this one here, but you could choose any of those 6 answers, 7 answers, 7 answers to get the 2 marks. So again, it's finding and copying the information on the text. Okay, so the next one. This question tests the ability to interpret meanings and ideas. So it's an explain question, but it is only a 1 mark question. So it asks what Lumos means when they refer to their 100% pledge. So it says here, our 100% pledge, thanks to the generous support of J.K. Rowling and others, 100% of the money you give to Lumos will go directly to Lumos projects and not to administrative costs. Okay, so the word explain means that you need to show your understanding of this pledge. You should not copy the definition from the text. In actual fact, on the mark scheme, it says that no marks are to be awarded if you've just copied the definition. You need to explain it in your own words. Okay, so you just need to look at the answer, which is 100% of the money you give to Lumos will go directly to Lumos and not to administrative costs, but kind of put it into your own words. So I've given you an example here. So all donations, so rather than using 100%, I've changed it to all donations will go straight to Lumos projects, and none of the money will be spent on general administrative costs. So I have used a few words from the text, but I've not copied it word for word. I have put it into my own words, which is important because it is testing your knowledge of interpreting those ideas and putting them, explaining them in your own words. Okay, so the next text is Texty, and it's taken from an internet blog. Okay, it's still talking about volunteerism. Okay, and the first question here is, look at the first paragraph of this text, and you have to name 1 volunteering activity that was organised for the college students and 1 activity the students did in their free time. So it directs us here to the paragraph that we need to look at. So we can ignore, for this question, we can ignore the final 2 paragraphs. We only need to look at the first paragraph. So we're looking for volunteering activity, a volunteering activity that was organised for the college students. Okay, so this could take the form of teaching English at the local school, assisting in building new homes for residents, or environmental cleanup. So these are the things in the text that it said were linked to the volunteering activities that were organised. So those are the things that they could do. So you only have to pick one of those. Obviously, it's got 3 different alternatives in there, but you only have to pick one. It's only 1 mark. And then name 1 activity the students did in their free time. So the one there, spread throughout the week, was also tourist trips and souvenir shopping. So again, that's 1 activity. You could pick either tourist trips or souvenir shopping. So I just picked tourist trips. Okay, so that's our first question on that text. Now the next question, the questions, as I said, as you move on through the text, become more challenging. So now this is the first higher tariff question. It's worth 8 marks now, and it again attests the ability to interpret meaning, ideas and information in challenging writing and to refer to evidence within text. So we know that we have to take evidence from the text, okay, and we also need to perhaps use our inference skills a little bit, because we have to think about the impressions that this writer gives of the people who take part in volunteerism. Okay, so thinking about impressions, I always try and decipher the meaning of the question into my own words to make it more simple. Okay, so I simplify it in my own words. So when we talk about impressions, we talk about feelings or opinions or thoughts. Okay, and we also think about the 8 marks. So it implies that because it's an 8-mark question, generally the exam board will be looking for 8 points. Okay, although these questions are banded in terms of their marking, generally it is like a list of things that the exam board want you to find. So generally we will always, well, I always tell my pupils to look for 8 points if it's an 8-mark question, or 10 points if it's a 10-mark question. So we're going to have a look at these then. So for an impressions, thoughts and feelings questions, this would be my advice to you. So you check how many marks the question's worth and make at least as many points as there are marks. Highlight the key words in the question. So as I did back there, you know, I'm looking at, you know, the words that I need to think about. So what impressions does he give who take part in volunteerism? So we need to find out what he thinks of the people who take part in volunteerism. Track through the text, highlighting evidence that answers the question. Show how the evidence suggests an answer to the question, and use the key words of the question in every point. And I would always suggest using connectives to start every point as well. Okay, so I would always ask that you highlight and annotate the points that you're looking for, and you know, think about what impression the writer gives you of volunteerism. So always have that in your mind when you're highlighting and annotating. So what I've done here, and you will be able to, if you go back onto the e-sgol website, you'll be able to download this PowerPoint as well, and you'll be able to have a look at it. So I've shown you an example here of some annotations. So I've taken a quotation, so using the developing world as a playground, and then I've put it into my own words. You know, how do I think that relates to the question? So what impression does it give me of volunteerists? So to me, it means they're interested in their own pleasure. They're not really, you know, they're not doing it for to help the people that they're volunteering to help. They're just doing it for their own benefit. They're interested in their own pleasure. It talks about a playground. Okay, so I've gone through this. I'm not going to go through all of these because I'm conscious of time, but these will be on the website for you. So there's lots of different examples there of the parts that I have annotated. And I would always recommend that you highlight and annotate. There is no point highlighting unless you annotate. The point of highlighting is so that it draws your eye to the parts of the text that you want to include when you write up your response. But if you don't know why you're highlighting, then it makes it more difficult when you're writing your response. So at least when I'm writing up my response, I know that when I use that quotation there, using the developing world as a playground, I know that this is what it suggests, that they're interested in their own pleasure. So it makes it much more simple when I'm writing up my response. So I'm going to give you an example response here. I've written 3 points for you. Obviously, you would need to write 8 points using this structure and your annotations. So firstly, Mohammed states, using the developing world as a playground, which suggests that her impression of people who take part in volunteerism is that they are only interested in their own pleasure. So if you see here, I have used a connective. I've used my evidence here. So I've taken evidence from the text and I've told the examiner what it suggests. I've also used the question in the response, and that's a repetitive thing that I teach my students to do, just so that it makes it 100% clear that the examiner knows that I understand the question and that they know what I'm looking for. Okay, so if we, click on this again, I go then to my next point. So my next point, secondly, the writer states it was all a bit too self-congratulatory, which suggests that impressions of people who take part in volunteerism is that they are smug and proud of what they are doing. It makes them feel good. Okay, again, I've used my connective, my evidence, what it suggests, my question in the response, and then I've, continued that structure throughout. So my next point again, I go back to the next point, which is additionally Usab Muhammad writes, volunteerism almost always involves a group of idealistic and privileged. They're not in touch with reality. So again, I've written my response in terms of, sorry, lost my train of thought there. So there we go. So additionally, Osman Mohammed writes, volunteerism must always involve a group of idealistic and privileged travellers, which suggests an impression of people who take part in volunteerism are not in touch with reality. So all I am doing is everything that I have highlighted and annotated, I'm then putting it into my response, which makes it much simpler and much more straightforward when you're writing your response. Okay, and then I would expect then using different connectives, you can repeat some of the connectives if you want to, as long as you're not using the same ones over and over again. I would expect 8 points to be written using that structure. Okay, so our next text then is the final text, which is text D. It's an article in a national newspaper which was written in response to text D. So this was text D, saying how it was kind of a negative view on volunteerists, and this is text E now, which is a response to text D. Okay, so the first question then is list 3 positive points that Sam Blackledge makes about the volunteers. So again, I'm looking for 3 positive points. So here we go. I witnessed the volunteers forming genuine friendships with the locals, developing emotional attachment to the children, truly caring about their futures, and also volunteering can be life-changing. So those are the 3 points that I've come up with. Okay, they form genuine friendships with locals, they develop emotional attachments, they truly care about the future of locals stroke children. Okay, so they're quite straightforward. You're getting the information from the text directly. And then there's only 2 questions for text E, but the question 12, it goes, well, it's a comparison question. So you have to look back at text D and text E, and you have to compare and contrast the writer's experiences of volunteering abroad. So we've already established, we've gone through what text D was saying about volunteerism, and now we're looking at what text E says about volunteerism and comparing them. So it tests your ability to analyse and respond to texts and their subtext using inference and deduction and linking ideas within or across texts. So we need to know how they felt about their experience, what they encountered. Okay, it's 10 marks. So again, it should be a 10-mark question, should be looking for 10 points. So the aim of the question is for you to be able to read 2 or more texts and find things which are similar or different. The text will always be about the same or similar theme, which we found with these 2 texts, but they usually have different opinions. And the similarities or difference should always relate to the question. So anything that you find. Now, this is the structure that I use for a comparison question. I must say that your teacher may suggest a different way, but from my experience, this is the structure that has worked best for the students at my school. So it's up to you really, but you know, obviously take advice from your own teacher as well. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's worth 10 marks, so you need 10 points. I would track through text D first of all, write down the heading for text D and write my response for it. Then track through text D, write down a heading for text D, write down my response, and then I use a separate heading of compare and write down 2 comparisons. So what I've done for you then is, again, I've highlighted and annotated the parts that I would look at in relation to the question. So remember, we're looking for their experiences of volunteering abroad. So I've got 5 points for text D. Okay, then text E. I think I put in on 4 points for text E. So again, I'm highlighting it, I'm annotating in relation to the question, which is, again, the writer's experience of volunteering abroad. I always need to keep that question in my mind, because that's one of the things on examiner feedback, is that often students don't answer the question. So they need to make sure, you need to always make sure that you're referring to the question. Okay, and this is my response structure then. So just the same as on the impressions question, I use the same structure, but I'm because it's a comparison question, I'm subtitling with text D. So I will do probably 4 points on text D, 4 points on text D. I've only given you 2 examples of each here, and 2 points on a compare. So they're structured exactly the same as the impressions question, but obviously in relation to this question here, the writer's experience of volunteering abroad. So firstly, text E states, as an alternative to spending idle time by the poolside, which suggests that the writer's experience of volunteering abroad is that people only do it if they are bored and have nothing better to do. Okay, you might find that you're using this exactly the same evidence and quotations as you did when you initially analysed text D with the impressions, but that's okay, because you know you're probably going through a lot of the same responses, but that's fine. That's what the examiner would expect. So I'd do 4 points like that for text D. I'd then do 4 points the same for text E. And then my comparison questions, I'm using comparative language. Okay, so whereas Mohammed's account is mostly a negative view of volunteerists, referring to them as self-congratulatory, Blackledge has a more positive view, stating that they do great work. Okay, so I'm using that comparison word there, which is whereas. And then for the next one, Mohammed cringed when the volunteers took photos of African children whose names we didn't know, which suggests they do not take time to get to know the community. In contrast, Blackledge talks about forming genuine friendships with the locals, which is a totally opposite view. Okay, so again, using that comparative language in my compare subheading. Okay, so I know I've kind of rushed through that, but we are, you know, coming up to the 45 minutes. I will just go through this quickly. On a reading section of a paper, you will get editing tasks as well. Okay, in the editing tests, you'll be asked questions to test your understanding of words and sentences. Okay, so this is again an example from this 2018 paper. sometimes, you know, some of the questions I've seen, well, not a lot of them have asked about using the past tense of words, but, you know, they can always ask you questions like this. So it says complete the sentence below by using the past tense of the verb given at the end. So the instructor, something, me, how to reverse the car into a parking space. So they want you to use the past tense of teach. Okay, so we know the past tense of teach, hopefully, is taught. So the instructor taught me how to reverse the car into a parking space. So all we're doing is we're finding out, or we're activating our prior knowledge and deciding what the past tense of teach is. Okay, so the next one is a multiple choice. So tick the box for the sentence you think is grammatically correct. So they give you 4 different choices there. So my advice to you would be to always read them out. You know, obviously you can't read them out loud, but read them out in your head. See if they sound correct. So the first one, young people find volunteering was a rewarding or worthwhile activity. Young people find volunteering were a rewarding or worthwhile activity. Young people find volunteering to be a rewarding and worthwhile activity. Young people found volunteering is a rewarding and worthwhile activity. This is all about the use of verbs then. So that's kind of in the past tense. It doesn't really fit. That's in the present tense. It's talking about what they find rewarding. So the correct answer, oh, it's actually to be a rewarding. I've just, that's gone on the wrong one, sorry, but it should be to be a rewarding and worthwhile activity. Okay, so it's the third one down. And then the next question, circle the word that best fits the meaning of the sentence below. The girl was grateful for the help, blank, she would have preferred to have completed the task by herself. Okay, so you have to find the word which fits. So again, I would try and read these out in your head as well. So the girl was grateful for the help, unless she would have preferred to have completed the task by herself. So that doesn't really fit. The girl was grateful for the help, whereas she would have preferred to have completed the task by herself. So again, that doesn't really fit because it's not comparing. The girl was grateful for the help, altogether she would have preferred to have completed the task by herself. Again, that word doesn't fit in that sentence. And the girl was grateful for the help, although she would have preferred to have completed the task herself. So again, that fits because she's grateful for the help, but we know that she would have preferred to have done the activity on her own. Okay, so we know that the one to fit is that one. Okay, and then you will generally always get one of these tasks. So it's sentence sequences. Okay, so putting sentences in order. So read the text below, which consists of sentences in the wrong order, and show your understanding by answering the questions that follow. So I would always put all of the sentences in the right order to answer the question. Okay, you can't really just look at the sentences and try and guess which are in the right order. You need to try and you know, put all of the sentences in the right order to enable you to determine what the answers are. So I would always try and put them in the correct order. So the correct order for this one is, after a relatively short journey, Fiona arrived at the airport. So we know that that's the first sentence because all the other sentences relate to what she does at the airport. So we haven't, you know, we can't, that wouldn't be correct if we put that at the end because she wouldn't have arrived at the airport yet. She loaded her bags onto a trolley and entered the terminal. So this is the first I suppose, action when she reaches the airport. She enters the terminal. Okay, she can't do any of the other things without firstly entering the terminal. Carefully, she scanned the area to find the shortest queue. So we know she's entered the terminal. Now she's looking around to find the shortest queue, because that would be her next stage, would be to go and, I suppose, if you've been to an airport, that's the next stage. You always go and check in. You try and find the shortest queue. Even so, the queue she decided upon was ridiculously long. So she decided, you know, she found the queue, but, you know, she tried to find the shortest one, but even so, it was still ridiculously long. Who's next, please? Called the attendant after what seemed an age. So we know that that's the final one because there's nothing that comes after that. You know, that's the next stage, I suppose, in the checking in process once she's entered the airport. So the answers would be, which sentence would come first in the text? Write the number of the sentence. So if we look at this, the one to come first after a relatively short taxi journey is that one. So it's sentence number 5. And then which sentence would come second? So we know it's this one. She loaded her bags onto a trolley. So we know it's sentence number 4. Okay. So hopefully we come into the end of the lesson now. I think I will just flip back because I feel like I rushed the comparison question a little bit. I just wasn't aware of time really. So let's just have a look at the comparison question again. Right, so if we look at the question first of all. So text D and text D are about voluntourism. Compare and contrast the writer's experiences of volunteering abroad. So we know that it means that we have to think about the experience and what they encountered when they were volunteering abroad. Okay, so I won't go through that again, but I just want to go through this structure again that I use. Again, as I said, your teacher may suggest something totally different, but this is a strict structure that I use and it has been successful in the past. So we track through the first text highlighting evidence that answers the question, and we write down a heading for the first text. So in our response, we would write down text D, underline it, and then we would write our answer for the first text, including evidence and explaining the evidence in relation to the question, which is really important. And then we track through the second text, highlighting evidence that answers the question. We write down a heading again for the second text, so text E, write down the answer for the second text, and then we'd write down a third heading, compare. Okay, so you should aim to have 10 points in total. So for example, text D, you have 4 points, text E, you have 4 points, and the comparison part, you might have 2 points. You can change that around as long as you've got 10 points in total. What the examiner doesn't want to see is you having just 1 point from text D, 6 points from text E, and then 3 compare. You need to have an even number across the board, because if you only have 1 point for text E, it shows that you haven't really understood that text. Okay, so we first of all highlight and annotate text D. So we've got lots of different points here. Again, I'm not going to go through them all. So we're thinking about how it relates to the question. So we're thinking about the writer's experiences of volunteering abroad. So for this one, little or no understanding of the local history, culture and way of life. They know nothing about the community they're helping. So that's the experience that the writer gets. And this one is they accept lots of praise, even though they don't try to get to know the people they're helping. And the final one, they had no idea what they were doing, which hindered the progress of the work. Text E then, we're highlighting and annotating the same. Okay, so this is a more positive one. So she's, in contrast to the first text, she's saying this writer, is saying that volunteers take time to develop relationships. Okay, they make a difference to a lot of communities. And then here's our response structure then. So you need to have 10 points in total. It's a 10-mark question. I would encourage you to use I would encourage you to use connectives throughout. And I'd encourage you to use a comparative language when you're doing the comparison section. So you would generally have 4 points from text D, perhaps 4 points from text D, 2 points to compare. Okay. Again, you're using the connective, evidence suggests, and then you're explaining. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, so that's the structure for the compare. Okay, so I'm just going to tie up now then. So hopefully, I'll have gone through everything that you need. So you're hopefully familiar with the types of reading questions on a Unit 2 paper. You understand how to find the answers for these questions and how to structure response to them. Okay, so feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section. Next week's session will focus on the reading questions in Unit 3. So again, I'll take you through sample paper and suggest ways to respond to the question. I hope the session's been helpful today. And as you were told at the beginning, the sessions are all recorded and you'll be able to access them again. So I just asked Miss Hales, are there any questions coming up at all?
It would help if I unmuted. No, there are no questions on the Q&A at all at the moment, so we haven't had any questions in during the session.
Okay. Right, so as I say, feel free to, revisit the recording. Hopefully I've been, it's quite a short period of time, 45 minutes to go through a full paper. So in some ways I feel like I may have rushed the, the higher tariff questions, but the PowerPoint is there for you to have a look at on the e-sgol website. You can have a look at those in your own, in your own time. Okay, but that ends the session for today.
Okay. So thank you very much to Mrs. Thomas for running this afternoon sessions. So if you want to go to the Carlam Cymru website, you'll be able to find the PowerPoint. And if you were to go to the WJC website, you'd be able to download the past papers by looking at the past paper section. So you'd be able to find all the resources and the papers that we've used today and next week on that session.